Hello, everyone. How strange nice to see you all, even though I can't see anybody at all. So thank you for having me here. This is quite a nice, exciting experience because this is the first time I'm coming out with my Systems Change Finland hat. And today I'm going to be talking about networks, why we should be excited about them, and in case there's any problems during the transmission to do with the slides, this link here, this bit.ly to TYO20 networks, is a link to the slides. So if you guys want to open them at home and follow along like that, that's great. So I'll just start. I'll talk about half an hour through some different aspects of networks, and then I think the idea is we'll have half an hour of questions and answers. If there's some big system breakdown, feel free to interrupt and we can reset. And just a little word about Systems Change Finland. We're a new association. If anybody is there from PRH, can you please stamp our papers? But we're so fresh, and we're a group of people who are interested in systems change and complexity, and we want to leverage our understanding of those for the benefit of society here in Finland. And just this week we announced a formal partnership with the systems innovation community. Some of you who are interested in the topic will have come across their website and their learning materials and things. So today I'm going to talk about networks, broadly three different sections: new way to see. When you have these new eyes, you have new choices available to you. And then I'm going to tell a few stories from the networks. I think it's important to say that today I'm not going to talk about the how we do this stuff, but more about why we should be interested and what it can give us. If you want the how after all of this, well, you can hire Systems Change Finland and we can help you with that. Is it allowed to sell here?
Of course.
Okay. So let's start with a new way to see. And it's important to establish some context. So here, most of you are involved in the public services and in the government. And the mental models we have, the way that we see things, the way that we do things, the processes available to us are from largely ideas that were cooked in the industrial age. But we're in a different period of time now. We have new science available, we have new technologies available, we have new mental models available. And I think I've been working 17 years in or with government, mostly in the UK. And from my experience being here in Finland 1 year, I think it's safe to say that most of the thinking that governs how public services and governments are working are still very much kind of rooted in the industrial age. These ideas of scientific management and Taylorism and things are still very much influencing us. So I want to try to introduce the idea that we have new mental models available, and you might call it this connected age or the now. Now using the tools and the ideas from systems thinking and complexity science can help us be more effective and deal with our challenges of this current age. A little word about systems thinking. So the industrial era time was a lot about kind of like analytical mindsets, thinking about parts, reducing things, getting simplified models. And then that allowed us to kind of think in terms of the sum of the parts that we have available to us and how we can organize those to deliver on our goals. The systems thinking way is more about synthesis, thinking about relations between the parts, looking at whole systems and holistic mental models about our challenges. So this example here, now this slide on the left-hand side, it's an industrial era way of looking at an organization. It's kind of, you're all familiar with the organization chart. And the same equivalent of that in the connected age or in the complex age is a network map. So the first one tells you who sits where, who's manager, and the other one tells you what's actually going on within that system, how people are talking. And we'll go much deeper into that during this talk. The old way is linear, low resolution, and object focused. The new way is nonlinear, high resolution, and relationship focused. The old way is concerned with structure, hierarchy, silo, teams, and reporting chains. And one of the limitations of that is when you look at an old map and I'm talking now in terms of organizational diagrams, what you see is what has been designed structurally and what you think should happen there. So, for example, an idea is generated at the policy level, it's assigned to some ministry, it's turned into an action plan, it's cascaded down to a team, and then you get some frontline delivery. In the new way, we're more interested about communications, decisions, social support, technical support, resource flows, and boundary spanners. So what we want to do is use our new tools and our new mental models to find out what's really going on, not think in some abstract, low resolution idea of what should be going on. So yeah, that's kind of, with our old maps, we can find out who's your manager, where you sit in a silo, in a team, in a structure. In our new way, you can see it's much more high resolution. So who you really are, what are you interested and capable of, who you talk to, how often, using what channels, who you trust and who you go to for technical support, who has influence and who can connect people, who are structurally segregated, how decisions really get made, and who needs to say something if it needs to be listened to. These are the things that we are able to do if we have high resolution network maps. So this is the old way, you all recognize this paradigm, and this is the new way. This is a map of a real organization. It kind of represents its nervous system, and the relationships that are shown in this map represent a bunch of different things, not just who your manager is, but how people are talking and decisions are made and resources flow. This is another map, but it's of an ecosystem. So when we use these new models or these new ways of looking at systems, we can use the same for an organization. So if you're a government worker, that might be confined to your ministry or your team. But the government also exists within a wider ecosystem, and we can map those as well. So let's have a look at the new way of looking. These network maps, they're sense-making tools, they're storytelling tools, pattern-finding tools, and decision-making aids. As you look at this thing now, it doesn't make any sense to you. It's a big hairball that looks beautiful, but you can't extract any meaning from it yet. But we do have like the tools and the analytical capabilities to dive into this data and start extracting insights from that, telling stories from that, and that leads us to be able to make better decisions. It's also worth pointing out that it's not just one map. This picture that you've seen here, it's actually a composite of several different maps. So with this particular organization example, you can see we have I don't know where I should point now because the camera is looking at me. So there on the top, there's the communications network. The slightly less dense one is a network of innovators within that system. And the bottom one is specifically a network of who are the people who are connecting across the silos within that organization. And when we talk about modern challenges of the government, we might be interested in being able to identify boundary spanners because the problems we're trying to deal now with don't sit neatly with the kind of ministerial structure that we've created in the past and inherited until today. So when you have these new eyes, when you have this new capability to look at your systems, you have new choices starting to become available to you. I think I'm doing good on time. Yeah. So I mentioned before, government institutions are complex systems that exist within a wider complex ecosystem. The same tools we can use to get a higher resolution view of the organizations, we can use to look at the ecosystem and also the relationship between the government and the ecosystem it sits in. So this is my friend Valdis Krebs. If you're interested in this kind of stuff, he is a really good place to start reading. So the links in these slides are quite live. But he says you need to know the network so that you can knit the network. It's all fine and nice to have these like wonderful rich pictures, but the reason that we want to gather the data to make those is because we want to do things with it. And this is what he calls knitting the network. So when you have a network map, when you have this high resolution rich picture, new kinds of interventions become available to you. And this is a very broad, high level kind of characterization of this. But because we're interested in relationships rather than just where the parts sit and how we might reorganize the parts, we can do engineering at the relationship level. And that's, broadly speaking, we can create links where they're missing. And later when I talk about the stories, I'll show a few examples of that. We can remove links that are unhelpful. So Valdis came to fame because he mapped the 9/11 terrorist network. And if the problem that you're dealing with is a terrorist network, then removing links is a very useful tool in your toolbox. And then the last broad kind of category of interventions we can make is redefining the role of a particular node within a network. And I'll give some examples of that also later when we get to the stories. So what kind of system issues can be addressed with network analysis? We can think about structural issues. So when you see a network, you immediately get information about the structure that's coming. Is it dense and resilient and has redundancies built in, or is it sparse and fragmented and unconnected in areas which are mission critical? We can look at things about where decision making should be made. We can improve communications pursuant to the goal that we're chasing. We can understand how power is really working. So in a traditional hierarchy, you think that the person on the top is the person who has the power. They have positional power. But actually, when you start mining the network data, you can understand that maybe that node over there down in the bowels of the organization really is the person that people are listening to and make their decisions based on what comes out of their communications. You can identify key people for business continuity. So some of the problems that are found with network analysis that you don't have, that you're not as successful with using old ways, traditional methods, is, for example, in restructure situations when some people are, the budget is reduced, so you have to eliminate some people, and you use some kind of a logic to decide who stays and who goes. And without a rich understanding of the value and function and role of the individual nodes, you might get rid of, for example, somebody who has all of the institutional knowledge encoded in their mind. Network analysis can help you identify those people so that you you don't make bad decisions like that. Designing for emergent behavior. So emergence is another one of systems terms. But essentially, we understand a lot of government people are scratching their heads saying, how can we facilitate cross-silo working? Right? I'm in the Ministry of the Interior, and I have a problem that requires collaboration with the Ministry of Justice. And how can I kind of stimulate a collaboration between those? So the typical way is you give an instruction from on high. You say, start up a kind of task force that includes people from both sides. But if you can see the latent structures of the network, it would already tell you who those people are. And you don't want to, you get a worse outcome if you arbitrarily set up some kind of a connective tissue without being aware of where the connective tissue already was. So that's got to do with surfacing latent structures. I'm quite aware as I'm speaking that a lot of the things I'm talking about seem quite abstract and higher level. So if you have some questions about understanding that better, please keep them in mind and we can discuss that in the question and answer session. So, and here I'm going to throw another systems term, leverage points. So network analysis allows us to identify leverage points in complex systems that can be targeted for interventions. And if you're not familiar with systems thinking, it's that leverage points refers to, this is from Donella Meadows, this idea that in systems, there are different places that you can intervene. And depending on where they are, this is a ranked scale. So on the left-hand side here at the bottom, we see these constants, parameters, numbers, buffer sizes. You might not be familiar with these systems terms, but essentially most of the kind of the traditional industrial era methods of doing interventions in governmental systems are located on this bottom half of places where you can intervene in a system. And what Donella Meadows taught us was the higher the intervention point you attack, the more profound a change you can make in the system. So here today, I'm trying to influence your mindset, the way that you see the system that you operate in, so that you get excited about a new suite of tools that you can use to start shifting the system. So I'm trying to work at an intervention point which is somewhere around mindset and paradigm, right? Some of the examples I'll talk to you about when we get to the stories in a moment is about looking at the structure of the system. It's a fairly high level leverage point or that. And to give an example of like changing a goal of the system, I think Mikael is watching here. His friend Indy Johar has been talking for a few years in the UK about thinking about the welfare state and how currently the dominant mental model about the welfare state is that it's a cost to the state. And he's trying to suggest this idea that what if we reconceive of the welfare state as an investment in the future potential of society? So you see, that's kind of he's trying to make an intervention somewhere up here in the mindset paradigm goal of the system. Can we reframe that? And if we can make that change, then a lot of the other components of the system can change a lot more easily. To achieve a similar effect, if you're working at the lower level leverage points, you have to do a lot of work and put a lot of effort for very marginal gains. But if we can hit the system at a higher order leverage point, a small change can have massive cascading effects. So here's some examples from the Finnish government. I have moved here. I should talk about Finland now. And these are kind of policy goals that don't fit within a traditional existing structure. So they require these kind of cross-ministerial groupings to be achieved. But the way that we allocate resources currently, so this is from the Finnish government budget, and you can see it's still quite a linear thing. Like there's large amounts of money flow into a ministry, and then they get further granularized into smaller kind of like budget areas. But where in there is kind of the budget stream for eliminating human trafficking, for example. There is no one budget stream that's dedicated to that because that problem exists in many of the different areas here where budgets are allocated. So it requires a higher sort of coordination cost. At this point, I should mention Conway's law. If you're not familiar with it, Conway's law is this idea that an organization will produce products and services which are a reflection of its communication structures. So you can think of how you allocate money to different public service goals as a communication structure. It also happens to be how the ministries are structured and how people are talking within the ministries and how traditional policy goals are cascaded down. So if this is the way that we talk and that information and resources flow, then the things that we produce are going to be a reflection of that. So I want you to try to entertain this idea in your mind. What if we had a more networked approach to this? What if an idea, a policy goal, like for example, eliminating human trafficking, was identified as a network structure that spans between these different siloed boundaries? That might be quite hard. And now we have some tools available for that. So the Climate Kick group has been really kind of leading edge on this stuff. And they've been developing instruments that say, if we have a new kind of a new policy goal that doesn't fit and match the structures of how we have established our machinery of government, then how can we go about identifying the relevant networks that are needed to achieve this policy goal over and above the existing structures that we have. So we create a new map to figure out who needs to talk to who, what different aspects needs to be connected, and then new structures emerge to solve those problems. It requires a bit of mental flexibility, because if I'm a health ministry person, then my whole existence has largely been confined within that structure, that culture, those communication patterns, perhaps recently with the exception of social care, with the health and social care thing. But that's two silos basically developing bilateral ties. That's not recognizing that in those silos there are elements of a broader network that can be mobilized together to more effectively handle those policy goals. Okay, let's have a few stories, which is like tangible examples from the field that hopefully helps you to make sense a little bit of some of these abstract ideas that I've got. I'm using very simple ones, and for obvious reasons, I'm not going to explain like who the particular clients are. If you ask me to come and map your network, you probably don't want me to go then show your internal organs to the rest of the world. And when we talk about the network stories, there's broadly three categories of stories that we can tell. One is topographical story, so the structure of the network. Once you have your data, you can see things about the structure that give you some like insights. The second category of story that you can tell is individual. One node within this network. What is their experience? What do they see around them? What is their lived experience within their part of the network, and they don't necessarily on a day-to-day basis see the farthest reaches of the network or what's going on there. And the third broad type of story that we can tell is the journey from one node to another. And I hope in the next stories that I tell, you kind of get a sense of what those are. So here's a story of a structural anomaly. This is a UK government project, and the goal of the project was to develop a fund which allows non-traditional suppliers to get involved in the government supply chain. So basically in this situation, what you don't want is the traditional companies that are making a lot of money from very successful at getting large contracts from the company. This fund is about introducing new suppliers into the supply chain. So this is a structural story. Basically, what we see here is the little brown dots are municipalities, the blue dots are suppliers, companies. And what we don't want to see is one of the blue dots connected to this mass of brown, because that would say that that's old company who's now trying to access. I should explain that this is an application process for the fund. So immediately structurally, by looking at this data, we get a question: who is this, right? One of these blue dots with the money label on it is already connected to the system. The whole goal of this particular process is to not feed the big beasts anymore, is to find new suppliers who can do that. And once we dive into the data, what we understand is a very smart big company created a series of affiliates in order to access the new funding scheme without looking like they were the old ones. But with having the network data, we're able to, just by looking at the structure, identify immediately, okay, somebody's trying to break the rules here, what have you. So that's a structure story. Just by looking at it, we see some patterns. We say, that's not what we wanted to see. What's going on here? This is a decision bottle. I should explain that the title is kind of for me to remember what the story is, but change the role node. That's the intervention that you can do based on the insight that you get here. So this is an organization whose idea was that decision making should happen at the level closest to the information or the customer. They had been previously a very hierarchical organization, and they wanted to distribute the decision making. So when we map the decision making within that network, we find that there's 4 people in the center through which all of the decision go through. So basically, they're not achieving their goals of distributing the decision making. And with this data that we've collected, one, we understand exactly where the problem is, and two, we also know, that's the people circled in the little red circle, and two, we also know from the data where the decision making should be located. So the data gives us this kind of insight and also tells us what to do about the problem that we've identified. Support burnout, change the node role. So in this particular organization, professional support is kind of like, who do you need to talk to in order to do your job? Sometimes it's called technical support. And we found in this organization that there were two individuals who were receiving they were essentially unable to do their own jobs because so many people are relying on their expertise in order to fulfill their duties. So what we want to, the intervention that you want to do is you want to reprofile those particular nodes and say, they aren't, this isn't the place that you go to for your technical support, and the investment you need to make is in other nodes who do have spare capacity and distribute the technical support further out into the different parts of the network. So this is a changing the role of a node kind of situation. Here's a fragmented structure one. So this is on the left-hand side, you see the different colors there. I hope you can see the colors through the video, but it's a team that is structurally fragmented, basically using the old models of well, if you work in the public sector, you have been through a restructure, usually when a new manager comes in. We used to have this joke, like, if you want to create the illusion of change, do a restructure. So you all know what this is like. And this organization ends up with 11 different teams. It's a very simple organization, it has a simple function. So having 11 different teams creates problems. They're unable to make decisions because there's 3 different team managers involved in any one of those. So here with the data, we use some of the network techniques that are available. This is a little bit the how, but like community detection algorithm. And we find out that really there's how the people are actually working together. There's only 4 teams, really. So why aren't they structured in that way? So if you have a situation where you're trying to restructure something in order to better accomplish some goal, you can either use some industrial era scientific management theoretical idea, or more likely internal politics, power dynamics, decision making, or you could analyze your network and understand how people are naturally engaging with each other in order to achieve the goals. And then model your restructure based on that. Another interesting thing we found here is the 2 clusters which have a little red circle around them. It turns out both of those are customer-facing or frontline-facing parts of the organization. So by looking at this structure, we ask the question, why is it that 2 parts of one organization that have the same goal and are facing the public are structurally so separated? They in fact represent as different communities. So we don't like the sound of that, because probably a more efficient working would be that they would be one team. And also with the network data, we identify, and this is using some of the analytical metrics, we can identify the very specific person who holds the key to why these 2 clusters are separate. So either what the network data doesn't tell you is if this person is for personal political gain, keeping them apart, or if they just happen to be well placed to bring them together. And just looking from this picture, I've been looking at this stuff about 10 years. I can see now, without seeing any name labels, which nodes, which connections between nodes I need to stimulate in order to bring those 2 clusters together. So here our intervention strategy is creating links. First, we're going to talk to this one node and find out, they know what's going on. And secondly, we're going to create new links between different nodes within those clusters in order to make them one. And here's this is an ecosystem map. And here the idea is that we want to send a message to this particular ecosystem. Some of you might have come across the One Team Gov network. So when I've got the network data, I can run my algorithms on it, and I can find out who are the influential nodes. So in a typical hierarchical command and control thing, a decision gets made at the top, and you have whatever mechanism. Is it the chain email? Is it the team meeting? Is it a newsletter? Way of cascading the information down. In a network-centric way, what I can do is I can analyze which of the nodes within this network have a high level of influence, and I can target the message that needs to go out to them just to those nodes and have a high level of certainty that the message is going to propagate through the system. So here we played a little quick trick. We made a map which showed all of these people. We identified the top 10 influencers, and we targeted them. You can see we've tagged them in this particular tweet, knowing that if they retweet it, if those 10 people retweeted, the message will go all through the system. So that's kind of leveraging the understanding of when I've got the data, I can find out certain things so that I can make an intervention that has a wider impact rather than trying to, like, how do I get 10,000 people through some linear communication distribution chain. And the last one, distributed capability. So this is, take an organization that by and large has a structure which is a typical command and control type of thing. But you're a person who has an interest in a particular domain or a particular field that you're not connected to within your organization. So with a pretty simple mapping exercise where you ask people to say, which stakeholder groups do you work with, or which impact goal do you have some kind of expertise on, you can create a tool that says, me sitting over here in this particular team, I want to work on clean water, for example. I don't know anybody who works on that. So if I have a tool where I can click on clean water, I can identify the cluster of people who are knowledgeable, and then I can get involved. So I don't have to ask my manager, do you know what this is, and get permission to go over, have a conversation over there. I have the system tool available to me to just find that information and then go and locate myself there. This comes from a recent talk. There's a link there at the top for the slides from Mikael Seppälä. I recommend you look at those slides, because if you're interested in this stuff, you're most likely going to be interested in innovation portfolios. So now we come to the end of our talk. I know that a lot of this is going to be like a little bit mind-bendy and example, but the point I want to get across to you is we have new tools available. Your temptation is to say, I can't invest in this, I don't know, I have to continue in the world that I know. And that's a choice that you have available to you. But I want to try to encourage you to, try on some round wheels, because life is much easier and better than with the square ones. So that's the end of the talking part. I only went 3 minutes over. The icons here, please join the Systems Change community if you're interested in learning more about these things. We have a Facebook group, Twitter, and Slack team, which is 3 days old now. Welcome to join. And also, if you're interested now to go further into the how, why don't you call us and hire us, because we'd be happy to take you a bit further on the journey.